As simple as that.
So, in a world where everyone's eating foods devoid of colour, we can call them beige foods, and people eating predominantly things devoid of polyphenols, natural steroids, any type of natural plant chemicals of note, we seem to have plummeted to the very lowest that we ever have in human history.
Yeah, it's almost an engineering no-brainer. It's, you know, I keep repeating this. We've gone from the most chemically complex ecology we can barely imagine. It's off the scale.
Yes.
We don't even know how complex it is, to one of the most impoverished we could have invented to build the most chemically sensitive structure we know. I mean, that you don't need to know any more than that. You know,
and we have people within that environment with unprecedented influence upon the mechanisms and the organisation and upon the very lifestyle direction of the whole of society. That system.
The system that now is generated is of course running everything, and it cannot be anything other than radically different, and every indication suggests it's going to be degenerate. I mean, another property of these same class of compounds is they're highly antioxidant.
Yes.
Well, this is one of the most delicate pieces of kit we know. The fatty acids are oxidised at room temperature. You just need to look at them and they'll oxidise. You know, well, you take away perhaps 95% plus of the evolutionary antioxidant effect, take that away, then you take the material you build the neural system from, essential fatty acids, you heat them in air at ridiculous non-biological temperatures, then you build the most delicate piece of kit, the most complex piece of kit that runs everything. And then you wonder why things are a disaster. There's not even a question there. It's just a statement of obvious fact.
Absolutely. This is why I like your work so much, because it's just okay. Let's get down to basics. So, sometimes you describe yourself as a reverse engineer in an evolutionary sense. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I'm always trying to find labels. I'm not too attached to labels, but the idea is just trying to piece together from the data. And I think there's good data. We have a lot of data. We're just trying to use the same piece of kit to make sense of the data. There's the paradox.
Yes.
So the idea is just to piece together what must have happened, the inevitable consequences, and then look to almost stepping back, you know, reversing the degeneration and ending up back with a functional system. So that's my interest in this. Really, it's, on the one hand, it's a very clear diagnosis. It sounds quite harsh, but without an accurate diagnosis, a clear diagnosis, we haven't got a chance.
How do we escape the paradox of being able to connect with enlivening information that can potentially help? You know, we can say help the machinery, help the quality of our brain, and actually do something about it that transcends the the direction of the brain in the first place. Does that make sense?
I think I get what you're saying.
So there seems to be a paradox that we're still connecting with information from, we can talk about the brain and its dysfunction as a defective lens. So is there some type of latent paradox that we're feeling new information? For example, we're reading your book. In what way will there be a problem with us helping to rebalance our brain system if we're still viewing the information from a defective point? Will there be maybe a problem with us motivated to actually recorrect it? Or?
Yeah, there are, I think, several hurdles, although part of my intention was to design the information in the format of our current insanity, if you like. Sure, I'm sure the same wisdom has existed for a long time, but we no longer recognise the language. So it has to be formatted in the dominant paradigm, which is the rational mind.
Yes.
So academic or based on academic data, and then repeatedly drawing attention to what the data is telling us, and the data is telling us not to trust our interpretation. I mean, that's not my data. That's in the neurological literature. Then, bit by bit, for all I'm saying, there's severe dysfunction here. I haven't given up hope. We can still conceptualize, we can still come to the conclusion there's a serious problem, we can come to the conclusion of what it is. That won't change our consciousness, but it can provide a compelling concept, a compelling rational idea that we need to put the structure back. And that will then automatically begin to change the perception. And we can basically factor in our delusion. So we know we're deluded, we know we'll we won't assess the data correctly. But once we understand that, we can begin to correct that, factor it in. So we think, oh, well, this isn't too important. Hang on a minute, no, it's seriously important, sort of thing.
Yes.
A very simple example.
It's kind of another really interesting aspect of your work is it's so practical and proactive. It's not a dry, abstract, philosophical kind of look into what consciousness is, or what the brain is and how it functions. It's giving you clear advice to what you actually need to do to refine and reorganize the dysfunctioned architecture of your brain, and thus allow the rest of your life, the feeling states that you have, the demeanour, the whole personality of your system to change over a course of that nutritional change. Is it just nutrition we're talking about here, or are there other aspects that kind of fit into...
Yeah, what we call nutrition, the basic engineering, the construction materials, absolutely essential, but not the whole picture.
Sure.
If it was, it would have been solved a long time ago.
Yeah.
But absolutely fundamental. It's basically, there's a bit of a sort of loop in all of this, in that we need to do a reconstruction and shift the piece of kit that's in charge, that cannot really assimilate properly.
Yes.
It's perceptually limited and so on, and move to the piece of kit that can do all that. But of course, one without the other is very difficult. It can be done, I think, sort of incrementally, a sort of bootstrapping effect. But yeah, it is a sort of practical option. It is something that can be achieved, I think, yeah.
I mean, it makes me laugh when some more dualistic types actually doubt whether nutrition has an effect on the psychology, on the brain at all. And then what is a matter of the fact, the brain is almost entirely comprised of, as you say, essential fatty acids, amino acids, predominantly acids, and water, which is about 6.7 pH in structured water in the system. Have you looked into how water in, for example, an arboreal, am I pronouncing this right, arboreal, rainforest environment differs to the water we're having now, and how that has affected consciousness?
Not in any detail. The little bits I've read around, it certainly will be different.
Yes.
It's not a cop-out. I sort of skirt around some of these other issues, because although they're important, I like to bring it back to, well, two things really. If there's a major structural problem, that's the first priority.
Yes.
Obviously water's part of that, but I think it'll be secondary to the neural structure and neurochemistry. Second part of that is if we're trying to solve the problem with the piece of kit that doesn't work, we're not going to get anywhere. We don't even know what questions to ask. If there's a case for latent cognitive function, let alone anything else, the sensible thing to do would be to access as much of that as we can, then ask these questions and solve them, without necessarily worrying too much about all the important, but I call secondary details. So yeah, I think it'll be important. How important, I don't know. Let's get the thing working a bit better, and then we'll figure these questions out a lot more quickly.
There's a feeling that I have that well, this is being edited anyway, so can I just get some water?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, well, I'll just let it run.
I haven't been watching you, Tay, I'm sorry. You may have been doing...
Throwing things at us.
Okay, well, at this point, is there anything specific that we should talk about, that you would passionately want to talk about? And I'll ask the appropriate questions.
Yeah,
there was a few questions I had, and...
covered some pretty key stuff there. I mean, I've sort of distilled it down to developmental and operating environment, and that's,
I think we should talk about the future.
Okay, yeah.
The last section. So, when reading kind of the 200,000 years prior to where we are now, and the kind of the consciousness states of the hominids, there's almost a sense of the Garden of Eden, a kind of a golden age, and since that point, we've kind of fallen from grace due to lifestyle perversions and on all the rest of it. It feels like with the new rise in information and consciousness and our increased ability to actually utilize that information, that we have a very good practical future to actually reattain that kind of pristine state. And I get the fact, I really kind of sense in your work that the brain states and the dominance of of the left over the right has been so responsible for a degradation from this, this golden period, and the harmonisation of the hemispheres, and the right hemisphere back in its proper orientation is very accordant to this golden age as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about these ages and where we're heading for the future?
I think that's a sort of reasonable account. It comes back to simplifying it that the neural system was archaically specialised. There were genetic variations between the hemispheres. That's well evidenced. If you have a blanket hormonal effect, which is again well evidenced if we originate in the tropical forest.
Yes.
That irons out the genetic expression, but the code's still there, so the difference is still